When I moved to Seattle 7 years ago from New York, I was really impressed by the philanthropy and nonprofit sector here. And I thought in New York it was all about finance and media, and in the Bay Area where I had also lived, it was about tech. But here in Seattle, it's really about philanthropy and the nonprofit sector, because we have the Gates Foundation, we have Casey Family Programs, we have World Vision, Microsoft and Boeing and Starbucks are all doing so much philanthropy. And yet you really don't see a lot of coverage about this other than a little bit in the business reporting, a little bit of health, a little bit of education and science reporting, but not really coverage of philanthropy in the nonprofit sector as a beat. And I think it's a really big missed opportunity to show how Seattle is this hub of philanthropy and nonprofit work going on globally as well as locally. So I would really love to be able to open up the newspaper or turn on the TV news and really see something regularly about that.
In 10 years, I would like Seattle to be an example for how cities can grow in a way that are welcoming and responsible in terms of environment, climate justice, a paradigm shift in terms of how we view things like displacement and gentrification, and look at building dense cities as actually an exciting thing in our future instead of a scary thing. So I think that in the next 10 years, Seattle has a chance to be on the cutting edge for cities in North America, especially West Coast growing cities. So I get excited about the future, and I get frustrated when other people aren't excited about the future. And it makes me sad for them because they spend every day looking at a crane in the sky and feeling scared or fearful or this deep sense of grief and loss for this city and how it's changing. And they wake up every morning and they go through their day, and it's that intersection's different. And my favorite coffee shop has gone out of business, and my favorite grocery store has changed. And it's that constant loss instead of looking at what we've gained, which is people from other countries. We have a lot of folks coming from other countries that are experiencing the effects of climate change, climate refugees. That's going to continue to be an issue. People from countries in Asia, climate refugees internally, which migrants from other places in North America or other cities. Pacific Northwest has a moderate temperate climate. We're not going to experience the changes. All of that is going to, even if our job situation was stagnant, I feel like we would still have a need to build more housing. And so getting Seattle framed, we already are leaders in terms of forward thinking in intersections of climate and housing, but kind of revving that up to like get some data around that. So getting some data around that to make sure that other cities can kind of like follow in our footsteps. I'm sure we're not going to do everything perfectly, so not just follow in our footsteps, but maybe see some of the mistakes and not repeat them, especially in terms of messaging. And this focus on preservation. It would be great if people saw preservation in terms of like language and culture and those kinds of things, instead of preservation of like a structure, like a parking structure, for example, in downtown Seattle where people could live. And if people live in downtown Seattle, then they're not living 5 miles away and driving, or they're not living 20 miles away and driving. So I see housing justice and climate justice as completely interlinked. And so I see the future of Seattle being a hopeful place where we can be a leader and a role model for other West Coast cities. And so I'm excited about the future.
American Dream does not exist today based on the ebb and flows of our society's ups and downfalls. In my time frame of becoming a young adult, I've seen the Twin Towers fall. I've seen Katrina happen. I've seen people go to war. I've seen the stock market crash. I've seen recession. I've seen housing basically be lost. I've seen protests. I've seen tanks come out of protests and actually, pretty much murder people. And in a lot of ways, what used to maintain the American dream has historically been the middle class. And we've seen that the middle class has no security. And because it has no security, really this idea of American dream has no security. And because it has no security, the responsibility then falls back on us as individuals to then make whatever dream we want to make happen outside of what it means to be American, because in a lot of ways there has been a lot of mistrust with America. So the American dream in today's time is not necessarily an American dream. It's more so of a social responsibility. What will we do to make the world a better place? I think that's the new modern day millennial version, Generation X, Z, all of those generations, new approach to what a dream is supposed to be, a social fulfillment to making the world a better place.
The issue is what I call rent certainty. Normally it's called rent regulation or rent stabilization or rent control. A lot of different terms. I prefer rent certainty because I feel people who rent need the same type of potential increase in price of their lodgings as someone who has a mortgage. So I know people with 15-year mortgages. I myself have a 30-year mortgage. That thing's set for 30 years. The only thing that changes, of course, are the taxes, depending on the assessment or anything we vote for through the political process. And I think anybody who with a place to live needs that same type of feeling of confidence. One of the things I like to see happen more locally is looking at what other communities have done. So Berlin just reinitiated a whole new type of rent control that they've put into place. Ireland voted it in November. 11 countries in Europe have put in different types of rent control because it serves the people. Profit people and profit motive people, they have their point of view, but they're only one part of the culture. The larger part of the culture are the rest of us. And I think the local news needs to pay attention to all the rest of us, and that the suffering that is being pushed on people through incredible rent increases. If this was any other category, if this was the price of milk, and the price of milk was going up 10, 15, 20% a year, every year, it would be huge. When the price of gas began to go up in one of the presidential campaigns 10, 12 years ago, it became a national issue, and both candidates began to have to speak to what was going on with the price of gas. This thing with housing, I think because it's not really affecting the elites are probably often the people raising the prices. They are very often not the people suffering from the prices. They may live in mortgage situations. They're not feeling it. Their children maybe are feeling it, but they could be covered by their parents. So if you're not in that kind of elite cluster, which are probably people that control what comes out of media, what comes through government, then you're not going to feel the pinch. The rest of us are feeling it. The third thing that happens when there's a lot of increase in rent is that people leave communities to go move somewhere else where they can find lower rent. What happens is that fabric begins to fray. And so it's not more than just me and a place to rent. I have my friends here. My children have their friends here. Our stores are here that serves the things that we eat. Our churches are here. Our places of celebration are here. When we're forced out to other communities, that whole thing just begins to spread out and fray. And then you're going to begin to see additional costs from maybe spousal abuse, maybe alcoholism, drug abuse, maybe increase of crime, because that knitness and that community, which helps people socialize and learn, is not lost, is not there and gets lost. So I like to see more coverage of that, and I'm Mark Douglas. That's my story.